Okay. Okay, amazing. So this was like, I really happen to have liked this week's Parsha very much. So we're going to talk a little bit about this week's Parsha. And the name of this week's Parsha is Yisro. Okay, so who was Yisro? Yisro was a non-Jewish Midianite priest. Okay, and this is probably one of the most important Parshas in the Torah because this is the Parsha that describes what happened at Har Sinai. So you would be thinking, like, if you had to name the Parsha, right? You would name it after Moshe. You would name it Torah. You would name it something a little different than naming it after Yisro. Like all of us, you ever drive around and you see these streets that are really named after people. Joseph Aaron Boulevard,
Yes.
Faye Court. Faye Court, I know, is named after Faye Tenenbaum. Okay, that's where Julie Kaplan used to live in Faye Court, which was named after her grandmother. So it just, it's very interesting. So I used to like to pretend that Gail Crest is named after me, but okay.
You mean it's not? I'm shocked.
I said, listen, what's the worst, Okay. So the question here is, what was it that Yisro had to teach us? Like, he had to have a profound lesson if they named this Parsha after him, and we could learn a lot from him. Okay, that's why. So it's interesting. So this week's that Parsha, like on Shabbos, when we read that Parsha, that was the Shabbos of what we call Matan Torah or Kabbalat Torah. Like, it's very interesting that it has two names. So let's really figure out what those two names mean. What does Matan Torah mean?
Well, matana is a gift.
Yes, okay, the gift or to give, 100%. Good girl. Pat yourself on the back. Okay, Matan Torah is the giving of the Torah. What's Kabbalat Torah?
Receiving.
Yes, excellent, Chai. The receiving of the Torah. So you have to realize, like, this is a big point that people don't get. Sometimes you really put your kishkas into this gift. You really want to give someone a nice gift and you wrap it up and you're so excited. And then they get it and they go, or don't give me any gifts. I don't need any gifts. Meanwhile, you're like, right? So there's a big point here that Hashem had the Torah really prepared for everyone. Okay? This was supposed to be a world's gift. Right? Everyone should have bought into the Torah, so to speak. But there was no one out there who would take the Torah except for
Jews.
The Jewish people and those who converted, right, to accept the Torah. And so Yisro was one of those people. So this is an important thing for us to understand. Like, a lot of times you can hear information and it makes sense and you really understand it. Like, so many of us know, like I'm like, by me with food, this is my problem. Okay. I have a very hard time. Like, I like sugary stuff. I like that kind of stuff. And is that really good for you? No, it's not. Okay. So really, I know it's not. I'm a real exerciser. I have all this in my head. I got this information, but what happens?
You can't do it.
I can't seem to really take it to the 9 yards, take it to the end zone. And this is something that's very special that Yisro teaches you. Okay. And what Yisro wants to teach you, what the Torah wants to teach you about Yisro is he didn't have it easy. It wasn't like, it was like, for sure, I'm kind of, I don't really have a choice. Like sometimes, like, when do people get really conscious about their health? When they get sick, right?
Yes.
Right? Isn't it true? Suddenly when they get sick, suddenly you can do without the sugar. Suddenly you could do without this because it's such a, an important reality. So when Yisro becomes a Jew, the Torah goes out of its way to show you that it wasn't such a simple thing. It was a real task. So let's see how the Torah shows it to you. And then from here, we can learn how to really listen. So the first thing the Torah says is Vayishma Yisro, that he heard. Okay? Kohen Midian, the Kohen of Midian, the son-in-law of Moshe, everything that Hashem did for Moshe and for the Jewish people. Okay? And that Hashem took the Jewish people out of Egypt. So these were the things that he heard. So let's really understand, like, because people talk about this all the time, effective listening, to learn to really listen to people in a way that they feel that they were heard. Okay. So because a lot of times we listen, and today, like, it's getting worse and worse because of this, right? So I always tell you, like, people are talking and people are looking at their phone. I'm like, until I got one, I didn't understand how people could do it, but people do it, right? Right? You're talking, you're talking to your kids, you're talking to them, they're looking down on the phone, or even we end up doing it.
Yes.
It's a hard one, okay? So Torah tells you to listen, you have to have 3 parts, okay? And I really want you to memorize this. It's such a nice idea, okay? So one is to hear the words, means I'm like seriously listening to you, right? Like Cecile right now, like I see you really listening. I'm really grateful. And to everyone else, like I see when your heads are nodding, this kind of thing, right? Then what do I know? You're paying attention. You're actually listening. And that makes a big difference to the person who's speaking. Imagine the person is speaking and you're like this, doing your nails, like you're like totally oblivious. Like that's not, and then, you're going, do you hear me? What? Listening. No, you're not listening. You're like in another world. Okay. So one is to hear the words. The second thing is to understand them. Okay. So sometimes, people are talking to you. I always say this, right? And they say it, you're listening to the intonation. So like, how are you? Fine. Oh. Yeah, that doesn't mean you're so fine, right? So I'm looking to understand. And now the most important part to listening, the Torah tells you, is do something about it when you can. Okay? Like sometimes you can't do anything about it, right? People have certain service and you can, so what are you doing when you're doing something about it? You're being that listening ear. You're being kind to them. But really the Torah is telling you, you hear information and this information is true. Get up and do something. Yes. I'm going to just mute this for a second. Mute. You hear what I'm saying? Get up and do something. Now, if you want to look at the word Shema, Rabbi Label Lamb teaches us this. Just in the word Shema, you could memorize these 3 things very easily, okay? So first of all, somebody's talking, shh. Okay, quiet. Then they say something, you go, like shim. And then you want to help them. I got an idea. How to help you. Okay. So it's like such a cool way for all of us, to remember what Shema means, what those 3 parts are. So this is what we see with Yisro. It wasn't just that he heard the information. He heard the information, he understood it, and he said, forget it. God is the rightful God. He is the creator, the supervisor, and the sustainer of the world. And this was Kohen Midyan, which really means, the Torah tells you, this guy was a #1 idol worshiper, okay? He was a big philosopher, Yisro. He was a big idol worshiper. He was the priest of Midian. Like imagine if I told you Pope Francis became a Jew, okay? You'd be like, like what? That's amazing.
There's the kippah.
Yeah, that's right. It's a step forward. Okay, so you know what I mean? So when you think about this, right? So the idea that, like, we think, oh, I'd be embarrassed. Like, I don't want to look too religious in front of my friends. I don't want to look too religious in front of my family. I don't want to say too much. You know what I mean? But here is the priest of Midian, right? He had everything to lose by becoming a Jew. When you stop and you think about it, he had everything to lose. That's all his prestige. That's all his power. That's all his, like, how many of us can really let go of that? Very little people could stand that test. But we could maybe stand it on a smaller scale, like to stand up for the truth. And it's hard. I find it very hard. I'm not a confrontational person. I find it very hard. You know what I mean? Like when people are doing things, like for me to actually say, you shouldn't be doing that. But truthfully, we have to try our best, right? When there is a point to really explain and to show truth, that we can stand up for it. And you have to understand, like, it's not easy. Like, listen to what the Torah says last week. And when they're reading this sentence in the Torah, they tell you they have to read it in a way that's a little different so people can appreciate what was really happening. So it says in last week's parsha, it says, Vayihi b'shalach Paro es ha'am. And it was when Paro sent out the people. And that's really a contradiction. It wasn't Paro who let the Jewish people out of Egypt. It was God. Yeah. But the Jewish people still put their faith in Paro. And we have to be very careful today. We are living in very interesting times. I didn't have a chance to look at the news myself personally, but my husband said that Netanyahu and Trump said, soon all hell is going to break loose in Israel. Like in Hamas, sorry, to Hamas, not Chas v'shalom Israel. But Israel will obviously be very much part of that reality, right? Soon all hell will break loose. I'm going to tell you now that we cannot put our faith in Trump or in Netanyahu or in any of these people to clean this mess up. This mess is huge. And the only place we could put our faith is Hashem. And we can say to Hashem, God, please help your messengers that could be Netanyahu and Trump and all the soldiers. But we ain't kidding ourselves and thinking it's Paro who let the Jews out of Egypt. It is not Paro who let the Jews out of Egypt. And had God not shown a mighty hand to Paro, they would not have gotten out of Egypt. And that will be the same here. If all hell breaks loose, whatever that term means, and Baruch Hashem, we get rid of all our enemies, we turn around and we say, Baruch Hashem. And we could say thank you to Netanyahu and to Trump for being good messengers, right? And choosing to do these things. But the success belongs to God. And that's something we have to understand, because so many people will say, if God only showed me a miracle, then I would, believe in him. Do you know how many miracles we've all seen? Right? Countless miracles. I'll tell you, I flew to Israel and it was not easy. I really was kind of upset about it, but I couldn't get any other ticket but on Polish airline. Okay, so my father and my mother are Holocaust survivors from Poland, and they used to always say to us, oh, the land of Poland is full of blood. Like they would never go back to Poland. You know how sometimes Holocaust survivors, they go back? My parents would not go back under any circumstances. Okay, so I felt like a little odd. Then on the other hand, I felt, how proud my father would be. Okay, this is how we get to Israel. This is how we get to Israel. But when I got off the plane, you would not believe what I saw. Okay, so you go in, when you have to take connecting flights, right? So you sometimes have a stopover, you have to wait. So I walk in, there were 40, I'm not kidding, Hasidim, with Langepeis, which was what was most destroyed in Poland. 6 million Jews died, 3 million were from Poland. Okay. And of those 3 million, the majority of them were Hasidim. Okay. So here I am in a Polish airport, 40 Hasidim from Israel, like all decked out, just like they were, when Hitler, Yamach Shemoy came after them. They're dressed exactly the same. Nothing changed. And they're standing there and davening mincha. They were taking over the whole, do you know what I mean? Like the whole 2 gates. Okay. That's a miracle. That's a living miracle that I witnessed and that all of us know. It was a living miracle. My parents would have lived to see that. Right? And where were we all coming from? Israel. We're all coming from Israel. Like, what? Do you know what I'm saying? What? Okay? So it's not, we have to be careful because sometimes you don't realize God's screaming and we're still not hearing. Oh, I'm waiting to see a miracle. Okay, whoa, I've been showing you plenty. Okay, wake up. Okay, so this is what we have to realize. Like you see, it's so ingrained in us. It's so hard. Why would the Jews, God comes in, swoops in, does all these miracles and takes them out. But their mentality and their trauma was 210 years old. Do you know what I'm saying? So even for that year, right, that things changed, the trauma is still there. It takes a lot to fight it and to be able to really hear. So there's a very famous story between President Nixon and Golda Meir, okay? So Golda Meir is the Yom Kippur War, okay, with President Nixon. So they were still in Vietnam. So Nixon says to Golda Meir, it's a true story, and he says, you know what? I wish we had the kind of generals that you have. So she said, really? Which generals are you referring to? So he said, General Dayan and General Rabin. If we had them, Vietnam wouldn't look like that. So she says to him, you know what? I think we would like some of your generals. He goes, really? And she says, wait, so she says, he says, really? Which generals? General Electric and General Motors. Okay, you know, but we know the greatest of all generals is Hashem himself. Ein od milvado. Okay, there is no one but Hashem. Okay, so this is important. So when we say that he was the Kohen of Midian, right? He was able to listen and to give up all his status. So I want to tell you, there's two more stories of very famous very famous converts who become Jews, who really, it was a big trip. So every week, a man, and really women can also, but a man is mamish, it's a mitzvah for him to read the parsha twice, like before Shabbos comes, so that you really know what's in the Torah. So it's a mitzvah to read the parsha twice, and then to read the commentary. Does anybody know which commentary you're supposed to read? Not Rashi, not Rambam, the commentary called Onkelos, okay? Who was Onkelos? He was a person who became a great rabbi, great commentary. He wrote in Arabic. And who he was a relative of the Roman Emperor Hadrian. You know, when you go to Israel, there's a lot of beautiful architecture and a lot of beautiful things that were built. They will tell you that Hadrian built a lot of it, okay? So here was the nephew of Hadrian, who was a great philosopher, okay? He was very learned. He was a student. He studied all kinds of, philosophies and understandings. And he goes to the emperor, goes to his uncle, and he says, listen, uncle, I've been studying and studying, and now I think I want to go out there into the world. Okay, it's a true story. So the emperor says to him, you know what? If you really want to make a living, I'm going to tell you how to do it. Find something that really is precious, that's underrated. Something that's precious, that's underrated, right? Buy, right? And then sell it high. Like, try to sell it and get it into the market, and people will see how it's such a good thing and it's really needed. Okay, so he takes this advice, Onkelos, and he's looking around, but then he feels his life is still very empty, ends up learning Torah, okay? And now he converts. So believe me, the royal emperor was not excited to have a Jew in his mikvah. Okay, like the royal family and his sister has that son now that is a Jew. That was like the worst thing possible. So he kept sending people to get him to Rome, but any soldier that he sent, it ended up that Onkelos convinced them to become Jewish. Okay, it was like a whole thing. Finally, they get Onkelos, and Onkelos comes to the emperor, and the emperor says to him, how could you have done this? How could you have embarrassed us? How could you have done this? So he said, I just followed your advice. You said, find something that really is precious, that nobody really appreciates, that is underappreciated, and I bought it. That's Judaism. Okay, and now I'm living it. Okay, and to sell it would cost a lot. Right, so it was just like very interesting idea, but to me it's like it really shows you that there is an ability to really hear truth even at a cost. Like people are moiser nefesh, right? And I think as Jews, our connection to God and connection to the Jewish people and the way we've had to live in this world, we lived it no matter what. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, for me to see those Hasidim dressed exactly the same, nothing changed. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it was beyond. And even until today, it's like, like I'm even as a religious Jew, I look at them and go, they look a little different. You know what I'm saying? The white socks and like it's like, and they're willing to stand up and that's okay. This is what we believe. We have our Rebbe. This is where we go. This is what we hear. So to me, it's just really incredible. Okay. Now, what also was so great about him was who were the Jewish people? He's the Kohen Midian. Okay, so here he is, got a very prestigious position in the world, and he's listening about what happened to a very slave-deprived, low nation. You know what I mean? And this, the Torah tells us, learn to be humble and learn to listen from everyone. You know, Ezehu Chacham Lomed Mikol Adam. Who is a wise? Because very often we sometimes think like, what do they know? You know what I mean? They have no experience. Like we're, you're machavek, you like, discourage, and you just like throw people's ideas away. And really you see from him, keep your mind open. Like everyone has something to teach you. I will tell you a true story. It blew my mind. I was working with somebody yesterday, and she said that they went on a trip. I can't remember when it was. I think it was last week, Sunday. They were driving. It ended up turning freezing. It was really dark. They were in one of these, like, going towards Lakewood, in these smaller parts in the US. And the car went, could you imagine? And they were freezing, like the car broke down. They called someone to tow them. It was pitch dark right outside a small town, right? And they couldn't move. There was the 2 parents and 4 kids. Right? And it ended up being something like 1 or 2 in the morning. Okay. And you like that, I'm going to be honest, is scary. Like that's scary. Let's be honest. You could freeze. It's not only like when it's really cold like this isn't a joke. Okay. They waited for almost an hour till the tow truck came. And during that time, a man drove by. His name, she said, was Tim, like a nice guy, real, a real country kind of, country bumpkin, like missing his teeth or whatever. But listen to what he said. He said, "Can I help you?" And she said, "No, we're just waiting for the tow truck." You know what he said? "I'm not leaving you until the tow truck comes." Wow. And he stayed with his car. Like, I mean, that's beautiful. That's beyond. He stayed with his car for almost an hour, and he just made sure, because they shouldn't be freezing. They can go into his car in and out. And he didn't know them for 2 cents. He didn't owe them anything, know anything, blah, blah, blah. So this is something that, we can all like learn from. So you look at what a country bumpkin, his teeth are all out, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like, what do you learn from these people? You learn a lot of chesed and kindness. Do you know what I mean? That goes beyond. So it's like stuff that we have to try our best to integrate. It's that unbelievable story. So where do you sometimes see this like haughtiness? Like, do you ever, like, the doctor has an idea about the patient, and then the nurse says, "Doctor, I think maybe this," you know what I mean? And the doctor's like, "I'm the doctor," right? Like, we have to be really careful, do you know what I mean? Not to emulate that reality, but to really be like Yisro. Like, imagine you're the Kohen Midjan, and you're like listening about this poor nation that's afflicted and blah, blah, blah. And you say, "You know what? I can learn a lesson from these people." Like, it's really something. All right. Okay. So let me just say here. Okay. So now comes a good question. What was it that he heard? Okay. So what was it that he heard that brought him to Moshe, to the Jewish people? Like, what was it that drew him? So Rashi tells you it was 2 things that he heard. Does anybody know? 2 things that Yisro heard. One was that he heard about the splitting
the
crossing
of the
yes, he heard about the splitting of the sea.
Yes.
Anything else, Sheila?
About lifting the mountain? No.
Yes, no, but close. He did learn about Har Sinai, so that is good. And the real 2 things that the Torah specifies the most was that he heard about the splitting of the sea and the war with Amalek. So we're going to talk about that. Okay. So the splitting of the sea. What was so phenomenal about the splitting of the sea? Okay, yes. Big miracle. And the ocean split, and the entire Egypt is drowned in the ocean. He saw something bigger than that. He saw the hand of Hashem. He saw what we call, the way God operates with us is called Mida Keneged Mida. What is Mida Keneged Mida? Measure for measure. So you're a forgiving person, Hashem is more forgiving towards you. You're very picky. They didn't say this. They didn't say hello. Then when you ask Hashem to forgive you, he kind of looks at the books and goes, well, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So Yisro, this is like, let's go back in history here. So Yisro was an advisor to King Paro, along with Eov and along with someone called Bilam. So these 3 people were advisors to Paro. And when Paro said to his advisors, like, what should we do with the Jewish problem, right? We've been called a problem many times. What should we do with the Jewish problem? Right? Because they were worried. They saw through astrology, there's going to be a Mashiach, a Messiah, who's going to come and save the Jewish people. It's going to be a male born from these Jewish slaves. So what should we do to make sure that nothing happens? So Bilam came up with a great idea. Let's drown them all in the Nile. Let's drown them all. Okay? So Bilam is like, yes, that's what we're doing. This is my idea. We're doing this. And Yisro says, that's murder, and we don't drown innocent babies, right? And Eov abstained. He said nothing. So at the end, Paro goes with Bilam's idea, and now Yisro's neck is on the line, and he has to run away, and he runs away. And that's when he gets to Midian. But because he was so involved in that process, he understood that Mida keneged Mida. You think you're going to outsmart God. Look how God will outsmart you. Okay? You're going to drown my babies. You're going to be drowned at the end. You're going to try to stop me from bringing the Messiah. The Messiah will be born and grow up in your palace. Do you understand that? Moshe, when he was a little baby, sat on the lap of Paro. You know, that's his Zaidi kuchikuing him. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's an incredible story. So this is what he saw when he saw the splitting of the sea. He saw that it all fell into place. That's what they tell you. Like Emir Hashem at 120, when we get to the world to come, you will see how it all fell into place. Everything that we thought, that's what they say. Here you have all the questions. There, you only have answers and no questions. Here, you have questions and not that many answers. It's just an interesting idea of how you will see it all fall into place. Okay? Okay. So he saw like this whole big piece of history, and that's something that we have to appreciate. Okay, now let me see what else I want to tell you. I wrote it over here. Okay. Also what he said, which is very interesting to what Sheila referenced. Okay, so if you look in the Tehillim in Psalm 29, so it talks about what the world experienced as the 10 commandments were given. All right, so you were right. The world is shaking. There's thunder, there's lightning. You couldn't hear a sound. There were no, I mean, you couldn't hear a peep except for the roar of the giving of the 10 commandments. All right, because God made it. No birds were chirping, no frogs are croaking. Like, the world is like shaking with this, okay? Okay, so what happens? The non-Jews run to their prophet and their advisor, who was Bilam, and they ask, what's going on? Is God destroying the world again? Like, what's happening? So he says like this in the Tehillim, Hashem oz la'amo yitain. Don't worry about it. God is giving his strength to the Jewish people. And they all answer, Hashem yivarech es amo b'shalom. Okay, great. Let God just like hang out with them and good luck. Okay, you know, let God give them peace. What does it mean that the Torah is the strength of the Jewish people? What does that mean? Like, what does that mean to you? That the non-Jewish world was able to recognize and say God, like God just gave part of his strength to the Jewish people. What is this strength that he gave us?
Him is behind the Jewish people.
Yes. Okay. One, that he's behind us. There's a connection. Okay. Beautiful. That was beautiful. What else? Like, how do you find the Torah is strength? What does that mean?
Gives you something to believe in, rules and regulations.
Yes. Yes. Beautiful. Okay. There really is strength, I'm going to be honest, in purpose. You know, like when you wake up in the morning, you want to feel, okay, what am I doing? Like, why am I here? Why was I created? You know, there's billions of us. How do I make a difference? Like, who am I? What am I? So this is what the Torah gives you. It gives you an incredible strength to be able to take opportunity and use it wisely. Take opportunity of life that you were given and use it wisely. I was just giving class last Shabbos. Last Shabbos. And it was funny, like I give a class to some young adults, so they sometimes bring their friends. Okay, so their friends are like, these are people who are like 25, Okay, 25 years old. So they brought their friends. I don't know if she was a Jew or non-Jew. I don't know because she was very dark-skinned, like looked like an African American, but I have no idea. So I didn't want to probe, you know. So I just was talking about the Torah, and I could see like I'm using the word Torah, and she's like going off into space, you know. So then I said, you know, before I continue, I just want to get a clear definition of the word Torah. So what does the Torah mean? And what did she say? Bible stories, okay? Torah is not Bible stories. There is like strength in Bible stories. There's a strength in any story, right? But it's much more than Bible stories. What is it? Torah, really, the Hebrew word Torah, the translation is instructions, right? Torah's Chaim, instructions to live. Do you know what I mean? And that's what we have to understand. So, you know, it's more. So what did God give us? The instructions to living. So what does that mean? Like, let's all be real. Who buys appliances? We all have. No, you have like a blender and you have a vacuum cleaner, right? And you have, you know, your cell phone. You have, we all have a million appliances. Tell me here, how many of us really read the manual? Okay. You know how it comes with that little booklet on how to use it? Let's be honest. Okay, how many? Probably none. Okay. Right? What do you look for? You look for the power button. Okay. You press and then you hope you got it right. And that's about it. Now, what's this the down part of the fact that we didn't really read the manual? What's the down part really?
Didn't read the instructions.
You didn't read the instructions, and therefore what?
You don't know.
Breaks down, you've got a problem. You
You don't have the benefit of
Yes,
what it can offer you.
yes. Amazing. You're 100% right, Phyllis, and all of you. If you don't, like, I know my vacuum cleaner can do a million more things than I can do with it because I don't sit down to bother to really read the manual. I bet you it could do, you know, we don't have curtains anymore, but remember those days when you used the vacuum cleaner to dust your curtains, right? And then you had that special piece for the couch. It all has that stuff, but because we don't read the manual, you're not getting the entire benefit and picture, right? So that's the idea, you know what I mean, of really, you know, getting into it and understanding the strength of the Torah. It's like a very big totality. It's a very big picture. It's not a small picture. Okay. And we need to, you know, you want to see that, you know, when you look at it, then you see this bigger picture, you see God's hand. So I'm going to tell you a true story that happened, okay? While I was, you're going to end up hearing these stories twice, Chaya, or maybe more. The class, since you come, you'll hear the stories. Okay, but this was an amazing, amazing story, okay? So on the way back, I had gone with me, my daughter, who hadn't been in Israel for 20 years, and my daughter-in-law, and two granddaughters that were twins that were 12. Okay. So on the way from, I think it was Poland to Toronto, okay, which is from Israel to Poland, Okay. So we go to sit down. My daughter-in-law for sure called the airlines to get all our seats together. But when we got there, guess what? They weren't together, okay, which was not really great. So we go into the row, and my granddaughter is now going to be sitting between two Hasidic men, okay? And when you're 2 years old and you're on a long flight, you need to talk and have fun, and that was not going to work, okay? So she's about to get a seat between this Hasidic guy, my granddaughter, and this Hasidic guy's son, okay? That would have been like, you know, and the other row was going to be me and her mother and a stranger. Okay. So I realized I got to do the booby thing. What's the booby thing? I say, you could take my seat, you sit with your mother, and I'll sit with the two Hasidic men. Okay. So first, I asked the Hasidic guy, I said, you know what, maybe you'll move over, you know what I mean? And I'll take the aisle seat because I don't want to be stuck between the two guys. Okay, that's going to be very uncomfortable. So I'm sitting in the aisle seat. And he goes, are you sure? Because, you know, the aisle has to get up all the time, right? And I said, I don't care. I'm happy to get up. It's the mitzvah seat. I'll take the mitzvah seat, okay? So I take the mitzvah seat. And I'm sitting there, And I'm thinking to myself, it's going to be a long trip. Like, is this guy going to even talk to me? You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be like a long trip. So he turns to me and he starts a conversation. So he says, so where are you going? I said, well, I'm going to Toronto. And he goes, oh, I'm going to New York, you know, like when we get to Poland. I said, oh, that's so nice. And then I said, oh, Toronto. So, you know, where did you live in Toronto? So he goes, oh, I lived in Clanton Park. And I'm looking at him, okay, and I'm thinking, Hasidish and lives in Clanton Park. Like usually you're Hasidish, you live by Wilson, you know, where like Bubba and all these people are Hasidish by Clanton Park. And then I realized something. And I just said this to him. I said, do you know who I am? Which is not something I would ever say, right? And he said to me, no, I said, my name's Gail Michalowicz. And then he went, you're the one who gave your kidney to my father.
Wow.
Wow.
I guess that. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you believe that? So it was like so exciting. And then he got on the phone and he called his wife and blah, 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 blah. And he was going to his sister's wedding and he's going to send regards and blah, blah, blah. But only Hashem could orchestrate something like that. Like that was crazy. That was
wow.
That was a total crazy story. And my daughter-in-law's listening because she's in the other row and she says to me later, I couldn't believe you said, do you know who I am? I didn't say it that way. Oh. My daughter-in-law was like, what? She couldn't believe it. Out from my mouth goes, do you know who I am? But it was just such an amazing, amazing story. I'm so grateful to Hashem. But this is what I'm saying, like God is orchestrating. We just have to listen. And sometimes to listen, it's like what Shema said. Shh. To really be able to hear sometimes, like, let it go. There's lots of noise in our heads. Stop the noise for a minute. Just listen. You know, that's just a very beautiful idea. So I'm going to end with this because I thought this was also incredible. So it says here, it's very nice to learn this from Yisro, to learn it from everyone, because it just teaches you a very beautiful idea on Baruch Hashem, okay? On Baruch Hashem. So I just want to, so it says here, okay. Now it says that Moshe sat with Yisro and he told him all the incredible things, you know, like all the wonderful and beautiful things that Hashem had done for the Jewish people, all right? And so what he said when he heard it, it's like the first time that it's quoted in the Torah, where it says that Moshe says to Yisro, oh, Hashem did this for the Jewish people and all these wonderful miracles, and we went from here to here to here. And he answers, Baruch Hashem. Okay, so what's so interesting is that they say in the Torah, Baruch Hashem was said, but it was usually when something good happened to you. Like you say, oh, you won't believe it, I had a baby, Baruch Hashem. You know, oh, I just got a job, Baruch Hashem. But Yisro was the first person who said, Baruch Hashem, I'm so happy for you. Such a nice idea. I'm so happy. Here I am, the prince of Midian, you know, like the big macher of the world. And I'm very happy for this low nation that was enslaved for hundreds of years. Baruch Hashem, you got out. I'm so happy for you. And that's a very nice idea to learn to use, like, not just like, how are you? Oh, Baruch Hashem, but to learn to be able to say, oh, Baruch Hashem, you're feeling good. I'm so happy for you. You know what I mean? Like to learn to expand, not just for yourself, but to expand outward. So I can only tell you how much I love you and how grateful I am that you are all here. I so appreciate it. Like, I cannot tell you. I was really thinking if we get 2 people, we're lucky. And Baruch Hashem, we got so many people. So I'm just
welcome back. And thank you.
And I really apologize again for last week. It was like we were flying. I don't know why. I thought I could manage to do everything, but obviously I couldn't. Okay. Anyway, just to let you know. Okay, so everyone, does anyone have anything they want to share, or we're good? All good? Okay, all right, amazing. Okay, okay, so everyone have a wonderful, good day. All right?
You too, Gail. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.